Half-Life. It's a good game, one of the best out there. Amazing gameplay, great story, and good world building for the time of its release. It completely revolutionized the FPS genre. Now, what comes to mind when given the thought of its expansions? Many players would think of Half-Life Opposing Force, the action-packed story that focuses on Adrian Shepard, set within the timeline of the military side when handling the Resonance Cascade. This expansion gives us a ton of new weapons, enemy varieties, and overall is a fun campaign to go through. It's either that or they think of Half-Life Blue Shift, you know, Barney's perspective, which doesn't really add any new weapons or enemy varieties. Instead, it's just more Half-Life. But there's one release that everybody forgets about, which I don't blame them for. The fact that this mystery expansion is only accessible within the PS2 version of Half-Life or mods can already deter a lot of people away. Since my first introduction of Half-Life was the PS2 port, I have tons of memories with it, pouring countless hours into the co-op expansion known as Decay. So let's look into that forgotten expansion and why it's actually pretty good. I'm honestly all for different points of views during the catastrophe that took place within Black Mesa, so Decay is already welcoming. Because of the Half-Life 25th anniversary, many mods have suffered with their lighting and scripts, so I decided to play both the mod and the PS2 version. Honestly, the PS2 version has a solid port. The game attempts to accommodate the aspect of playing with a controller with a lock-on system when aiming, so that's why you'll be seeing these boxes from time to time. It's honestly a pretty good port and runs incredibly well. But hold up, here's a controversial take, but the HD graphics work surprisingly well here. Starting off just before the Resonance Cascade itself, the story focuses on not just one protagonist like the other expansions, but instead two.
Hello, Gordon Freeman.
We'll start off with Gina Cross, wearing a tan HEV suit. To the 5 people who actually played the training section within the first game, she is actually the instructor who helps Gordon grow accustomed to the HEV suit and how to handle weapons. You may have also seen her in Opposing Force, but I'll get to that later. Her personality is calm and composed. The second character that we play as is Colette Green. Wearing a maroon coloured HEV suit, she is the second character that the player can control. There's honestly not much to go about her, except for the fact that she's a lot more bloodthirsty and expressive compared to Gina. Both characters have voices when they're out of your control, and have 2 unique HUD colours when switching, just so you know who you're controlling. But right off the bat, the introduction of these 2 characters in their HEV suits already answers why there's only one accessible within the original game, which Gordon grabs, of course. Now that we've got the basics out of the way, let's jump right into the first level, Dual Access. Both Gina and Colette are tasked to help with the anti-mass spectrometer directly below where Gordon is supposed to be. I absolutely love going through Sector C pre-disaster. It only adds on to the rich world building that Black Mesa has. Before you start your duties, you run into Dr. Keller. He debriefs you on what's going on. Here, you also meet Dr. Rosenberg, and you can already see the subtle, conflicting thoughts between them, with Rosenberg being rather doubtful of the anti-mass spectrometer as it's being pushed beyond its limits, to which Keller refers to the administrator approving of the increase of percentages.
I understand your concern, Doctor, but the administrator was quite clear.
The administrator is a bureaucrat, not a scientist. I did not design this equipment to be run at such high intensity.
This is not your decision. Now, if you wish to stay and monitor the experiment, so be it. Otherwise, you can go back to your little labs over by the train yard.
This is an important bit of dialogue that definitely gives personality towards Dr. Breen, the administrator of Black Mesa. Even before the invasion of the Combine, he doesn't consider risks, instead talks his way into convincing the scientists within the facility into reassuring them that nothing will go wrong. So it's clear that he's very good at persuading, as he eventually becomes the leader of City 17, serving under the Combine and once again speaking for the public, as well as using his role to preach his thoughts, as seen in Half-Life 2. Colette is tasked to turn on the machine itself, as Gina is tasked to deliver the sample to Gordon. You can actually see this in Barney's perspective within Blue Shift, which is a very unique touch. Now you all know how the story goes. The experiment goes completely kaput. If I'm being honest, this POV scared me a lot more than Gordon's during my first playthrough, especially since our first introduction to the headcrab zombie is just seeing them chow down on some good scientist flesh. In regular resonance cascade fashion, we backtrack, but instead are on the upper levels of where we were previously traversing. You can actually see a security guard fend off a helpless scientist who is trying to resuscitate another security guard. It once again just shows how unprepared Black Mesa were at the time of this sudden invasion. Keller and Rosenberg also have conflicting thoughts, with Rosenberg wanting to contact the military to help those who are trapped within the facility, and with Keller wanting to put his time into containing the invasion. After clearing through some more headcrab zombies, you find Keller and Rosenberg, who have honestly settled their thoughts and come to a conclusion from their opinions. After following Rosenberg into an elevator, we focus on contacting the military after reaching the surface, and that's what the next chapter is all about. The next chapter has us going through the hazard course during the resonance cascade, which blew my mind away during my first playthrough. Going through the course during the peak of the disaster was honestly something I never thought I'd see. We also see Gina's hologram here. She doesn't really comment on it, but it would have been cool if she did. We essentially go through the entire hazard course, seeing it in complete ruins before eventually making it to the surface. It's honestly just a great way of reusing previous level designs, but adding in portions that Gordon never got to see, since the facility was operational at the time. Surface Call has Rosenberg explaining to us that they need to reach the satellite communications center in order to contact the military, and hey, the center is just outside.
Inside is the control room for the satellite dish, but this door is locked. If you can find a way into the...
So we have to venture into the warehouse in order to get to the other side and unlock the door for Rosenberg, fighting Vortigons and headcrabs. There's not much here other than this one insufferable puzzle. Decay tends to use the co-op element to its advantage within its gameplay, fitting in a puzzle to pretty much every level, but this one honestly sucks. The toxic waste essentially insta-kills you, and you basically have to find a combination to have both players make it to the other side using these mobile carts. Call me crazy, but there was no way that my smooth 5-year-old brain could have figured this one out. It was here that I also realized that the PC mod's AI also sucks ass. I think it's mainly due to the fact that it's a pretty old mod and the 25th anniversary update could have impacted this, but the PS2 version's AI actually works as intended. They have literal hit scan accuracy but always end up using the most OP weapons in their arsenal, which can be good or bad in certain situations. Anyway, after unlocking the door for Rosenberg, we now have to actually go back once more and rotate the satellite, and Rosenberg contacts the military, which leads us directly into our next chapter, Resonance. After contacting the military, Gina and Colette are tasked to head back down into anomalous materials in order to help Dr. Keller. And since Keller is so adamant on fixing the resonance cascade, he thinks that resetting these primary and secondary dampening fields is the correct way to end the resonance cascade. In all honesty, I have no idea what these do. Probably create some sort of defense system against the Zen creatures. I don't know, it isn't really gone into depth. But the level design here is pretty good. I love this one open area, and some of the interiors definitely fit into Half-Life. So after we reset the primary and secondary locks, Keller realizes that the dampening fields actually fail by an interference of some sort from the other side of the rifts. He chalks up the conclusion that the aliens might not all be here on accident. I have no idea what this honestly implies. Perhaps the Nihilants wanted the Zenians to come to Earth? I don't know. But after this chapter, the story does seriously pick up. It's the same within the original game, as another faction enters the field, which brings us directly to domestic violence. Now, in all honesty, this is my favorite level in Decay, especially since it's got extremely good level design, a good objective that really amps up the story for our protagonists too. The mission essentially starts off with Keller informing us that he requires an all clear code, one which only level 3 security guards have. He aims to launch a satellite, but due to the military locking everything down, he can't. The mission is essentially a massive hunt for a security guard. The level aims to fool you so many times. Since you're trying to find a security guard, with every room you encounter, you'll come across a Barney clone that is pretty much offed right in front of you, and it honestly does a good job with foreshadowing the military's arrival within this level. A moment of silence for Barney clone underscore 3,400,607. Now back to the level designs and the visuals. This honestly felt so realistic when I was a kid. I could imagine myself walking through the corridors which lead into these large rooms. One of the dorms I actually opened here, you can see a cozy bedroom with a calendar showing the month of December, which is strange since the resonance cascade took place on May 14th. So the scientist in here must have forgot to change his calendar. There's also the swimming pool area with a floating security guard. Fun fact, this dude has health. Crowbar him for a long period of time, he'll explode into Gibbs, rewarding you with snarks for being curious. Getting into some vents, you'll hear a very interesting quote from Rosenberg, but don't actually see him at all.
Halfway through level 3, lots of civilian resistance. Target has not been acquired.
This target he refers to could actually be Gordon Freeman or whoever the military deems as a high value target. However, this is essentially the last thing we hear of Rosenberg. Abrupt too, especially since it was initially his plan to contact the military. Unfortunately, after discovering their ulterior motives, Rosenberg is captured by them. This is why in Half-Life Blue Shift, one of the main plot points to escape Black Mesa is to find him. I also like this cafeteria and its extremely high resolution food in comparison to all the other textures. There's also a scientist who forgot to finish his mashed potatoes.
Excuse me, Gordon, but I'm rather busy now.
There's also this one final standoff between our protagonists and the military, and walking further down the hallway, we find the last security guard who's taking cover behind a desk. We escort him back to Keller whilst he compliments us, and that's where the mission ends once they meet. Now all that is left to do is to essentially lift the anti-air lockdown that the military has activated, which leads us to Code Green.
Do you read me? You were in the basement of the Black Mesa Air Control Building. Find the control room. Set the airplane monitor to send us all clear codes. So that Lambda...
I could not hear shit in the PC mod for this game. This chapter is honestly an onslaught of eliminating soldiers. It also utilizes the entire co-op aspect as well, with having one player sneak into the vents to open doors up, whilst the other eliminates the military within the vicinity. This chapter is extremely linear. To be honest, all of Decay's chapters are like this, but you can really see it here. You can easily complete it in about 10 minutes. I tried to save the security guard here, but he always ends up getting murked. For some reason, Decay really hates security guards with how many times they kill them in front of you, but we successfully managed to complete the objective. I'm gonna be honest here, out of the two people that actually played Decay, this might offend you, but I think Crossfire is the weakest chapter in the game and doesn't really generate any fun for me. Keller believes that the displacement beam from the Gamma Labs could be an element that could easily reverse the cascade. Once again, you're fighting the Xenian creatures as well as the grunts. There's not really anything notable here, and the level design is pretty boring. The only cool thing I found here were the secret rooms within the level. There's a crack in the wall that you can actually blow up with an explosive barrel, and there's a broken cage and a catwalk, which you can do the same thing to. These features don't ever return again. Raising the beacon is somewhat a boring task too, exactly the same mechanics as raising the elevator from the Hazard Course chapter. Intensity has Cross and Green rendezvous with Keller in the lab control section, where he assigns them the pivotal mission of initiating the beam matrix system, crucial for energizing the prototype displacement beacon. Their first step involves descending via an elevator to an alien quarantine lab which have been overrun by Zen creatures. These portions of the lab are extremely interesting and shocked me as a kid, once again highlighting the shady practices that Black Mesa were conducting even before the disaster. I absolutely love the way they dissected this headcrab zombie and strapped this bull squid to a tube. Pressing a button will extract its juice. Maneuvering through this hostile environment, they finally arrive at the beam matrix. Amidst the attempts of activating it, we face a relentless challenge of defending against Vortigaunts and Grunts, constantly appearing through teleportation. To activate this, you basically have to match the colors to the corresponding holes, probably one of the easiest puzzles in Decay. Despite the fierce opposition, the beam matrix successfully comes to life. With this accomplished, Cross and Green make their way back to Keller, who's finalizing the preparations for a resonance reversal. Rift is the final chapter of Gina and Colette's story. They are forced to defend the beacon as Keller believes this will cause a resonance reversal, stopping the influx of Zen creatures who are teleporting to Earth. This defense mission goes pretty much smoothly. That's until the Manta Ray arrives. You actually see these in the original game, completely obliterating military tanks and dropping off alien grunts. To tackle this, you have to hit it a stupid amount of times with the RPG before it completely obliterates the rift, causing you to fail the mission. After doing so, we successfully complete the task. And we get this interesting sequence with Gina and Colette shifting through reality, even capturing a glimpse of Barney traversing into Zen. This alludes to the idea that the story ends just after Freeman is captured by the Grunts during the end of Apprehension. Gina and Colette are safely taken back to Keller as he praises us, letting us know that the task has been completed and we can finally rest. And that concludes the story of Half-Life Decay. As for the fate of our characters, Gina is found dead within Zen during the events of Opposing Force. Although Opposing Force was before the PS2 port of Half-Life, it was later confirmed that this was Gina. As for the conclusion of Colette, it's a mystery. Gearbox co-founder Randy Pitchford suggests that she could have encountered the G-Man, as he is seen within Dual Access. It can also be possible that she died during the Combine invasion on Earth. People have also speculated that she is the lady talking to the Combine in Half-Life Alyx, but this was never confirmed, so I'll let you decide what happened to her after the events of Decay. Overall, this was an extremely fun story and a different perspective of what the other members of the science team were doing during the events of the catastrophe that took place during Black Mesa. So yeah, Decay was great, but hang on, you didn't think it would end without a clear conclusion of where these characters go after the events of the final level, right? Well yeah, you're basically right. But there is a bonus chapter. Getting an A rank on either Gina or Colette in each and every level grants us a bonus chapter, Zen Attacks. A unique element of the PS2 version of Half-Life is the fact that you can actually play as a Vortigaunt when activating some cheat codes. Select the dub Alien mode and you'll be able to play the entire story as one. It also has its unique ending. Reaching the end of Lambda Core, we are brought back into Zen, but this time we're being praised by a couple of Vorts as if we're some sort of messiah. I don't know how everyone in Black Mesa did not realize that a literal alien Vortigaunt was going through the facility, but as a kid I would always obliterate everyone on sight because the shit was so goofy. Completely pushing aside the story of Decay, you play as two Vortigaunts which are canonically named X-8973 and R-4913. An island gives them a task to retrieve a stolen Zen crystal. The level design is pretty much taken from Opposing Force. Here, you have to wipe out the military and reach the crystal, and that's just where it ends. This was actually an incredibly hard task since the Vorts don't use medkits or suit batteries to heal. Instead, landing an attack regenerates their health, so you'll have to really plan out how you approach certain combat scenarios. In the box art of the PS2 port of Half-Life, there's also a cut screenshot of Gina facing a Gargantua with a crowbar. Now, if you've seen my power-up video, you all know my take on just how scary I find this creature. But it's a shame that they cut him out, but I don't blame them since Decay's levels are extremely linear and don't really have any open spaces like the original game for the Gargantua to traverse in. Still, a cool chase sequence or having the Garg to be the final boss within the rift instead of the manta ray would have been neat. Or they honestly could have done something like Half-Life Echoes did, with the Garg being a menacing presence throughout its runtime, but you don't really kill it until the final act. It's safe to say that it was definitely a missed opportunity. An interesting mod called Decay Solo Mission is also in the works. Because of the limited accessibility of this expansion, Team Solo are actually making it completely playable with just one person, tweaking the puzzles and all. I've actually included footage from Decay Solo Mission within this video too. It only has the first couple of chapters, but it looks extremely promising so far. In summary, I would honestly rank Half-Life Decay just below Opposing Force. It's a unique spin on the standard Half-Life gameplay and does offer an entirely new story with a bunch of new characters. It's rich in content and certainly is a memorable experience when you compare it to an expansion like Blue Shift. Although some of the puzzles can slow down gameplay at times or can be a headache to figure out, I enjoyed my time with playing this expansion. The level design is linear, but not enough to the point where it becomes jarring. I'd give it a solid 7 out of 10 for what it sold. The fact that it comes with the PS2 port of Half-Life and wasn't sold as a DLC or its own expansion is also a big thumbs up for me. I wanted to make a video on Decay since I feel as if it's not really talked about as much as it should be when paired with the other two expansions. So I thank you all so much for watching. I'm going to make sure that I stay consistent with my content for the new year's and amp it up, making it better than last year's. I'll see you guys in the next one.